They say the moment the soul leaves the body, it sees everything, even its own lifeless form, lying still while people cry, pray, and whisper final words. But what if that instant isn't the end, but the beginning of a profound confrontation with your own unconscious? I am Carl Jung, and through my near-death experience in 1944, I witnessed something that shattered every certainty I held about life and death. I saw my own funeral, not as a ghost, but as a conscious observer suspended between two worlds. What I discovered in those moments changed not only my understanding of psychology, but the very nature of human existence itself. Imagine floating above your own body, watching the people you loved grieve, realizing that death is not an ending, but an unveiling of truths you spent your entire life hiding from. I learned that the soul doesn't simply depart, it awakens. It sees the shadow it denied, the personas it wore, and the collective unconscious that connects all of humanity. This revelation challenges everything we think we know about dying. So, what happens when your soul finally confronts the archetypes that shaped your entire existence? Does it feel terror, liberation, or divine recognition? Make sure to listen to my speech until the very end and discover what I uncovered about the most mysterious transition of human existence. I once said that death is not a punishment but a psychic fact, a transformation of consciousness. When I nearly died after my heart attack, I entered a state unlike anything I had experienced in all my years of studying the human mind. I found myself floating above the earth, seeing it as a luminous sphere against the infinite darkness of space. I was no longer Carl Jung, the doctor, the husband, the father. I was pure awareness, stripped of every identity I had constructed. In those moments, I stood at the threshold of my own funeral, observing the people I loved, feeling both connection and profound detachment. I tried to speak, to touch, to reassure them, but I realized slowly and painfully that I existed in a dimension beyond their perception. This realization was one of the most shattering awakenings of my life, a mirror that forced me to see my existence from the outside without the protective layers of ego or persona. Everything I thought I had hidden, my fears, my ambitions, my contradictions, became visible in the light of this expanded consciousness. There was no judgment from others, only the recognition of what I had created within my own psyche. I witnessed what I can only describe as the archetypal funeral, a ceremony not just for my physical body, but for every mask I had worn. I saw the faces of those I had helped and those I had disappointed. I observed love expressed through tears, regret through silence, and forgiveness through the rituals of mourning. In those sacred moments, I began to understand that every word spoken, every relationship formed, every wound inflicted or healed had created ripples in the collective unconscious. I was watching the impact of one life echo through the interconnected web of human experience. For some souls, I realized, this observation brings integration. For others, an overwhelming confrontation with the shadow they refuse to acknowledge in life. And while the body lies still, the psyche moves through layers of reality, feeling the union of conscious and unconscious blend into a single awareness that words cannot adequately describe. I understood in that moment that this stage is not meant to punish, but to individuate. The soul is given a chance to observe, to comprehend, to finally become whole. Only when it has seen the complete picture, both light and shadow, does it move toward what I called the collective unconscious, the realm where all human experience is stored. I saw that in this transition, archetypal figures appear not as illusions, but as real manifestations of the psyche itself. The wise old man, the anima, the shadow, all emerge to guide the spirit toward integration. Yet the newly freed soul hesitates because letting go of ego identification means letting go of everything familiar. It feels like dissolving from the known into the infinite self. And at that threshold, the soul must decide whether to cling to its personas or to surrender to the deeper reality. It's here that my message becomes profoundly psychological and spiritual. I learned that the soul that turns toward wholeness, toward the self, the God image within, transcends peacefully. But the one that resists, that cannot integrate its shadow or release its inflated ego, may wander in psychological fragmentation until it learns acceptance. Death, I realized, is not the end of life, but the end of separation. And only integration survives. If you're watching this right now, ask yourself, what would your soul see if it stood at your own funeral today? Would it find wholeness or unfinished fragmentation? Take a moment to reflect. I came to understand that the separation between life and death is not a wall but a veil, thin as a membrane between conscious and unconscious. When the body ceases to function, consciousness doesn't vanish, it expands beyond the limitations of the personal ego. The soul is no longer confined by the persona. It begins to perceive the archetypal realm directly. It sees the material world fading and the psychic world unfolding like layers of a dream becoming lucid. Many souls, I believe, linger for a time, drawn by unfinished business, psychological complexes, or deep attachments. Some are astonished to see that life continues without them, that they were not as central to existence as the ego believed. Others feel profound peace, understanding that their individuation process was completed. I learned that these first moments after death are like waking from identification with the ego and recognizing who you truly are. Not the name, not the role, but the self, the center of the psyche that connects to something infinite. I discovered that those who live unconsciously, enslaved by their shadows, driven by complexes they never examined, often struggle to recognize the light of the self. They remain near the earthly plane, unable to detach from the material projections they worshipped. But those who cultivated self-awareness, who confronted their shadows, who pursued individuation during life, pass easily through the transition. I came to see that the afterlife isn't determined by belief systems, but by psychological integration, the degree to which the conscious and unconscious were unified. The more a person aligned with the self while alive, the clearer their awareness becomes when leaving the body. It's not punishment or reward, it's psychological law. The soul rises to the level of its own integration. I became to understand that the soul isn't trapped, it is learning. It witnesses the reactions of those left behind, not to judge them, but to understand relationship and connection at a depth impossible during life. The sincere grief of loved ones creates psychic energy that accompanies the soul forward. Every thought directed with genuine feeling helps the departing psyche complete its separation. But when people grieve with desperate attachment or refuse to release, that energy can bind the soul to the earthly plane longer than necessary. This is why I often advised families to honor death as transformation rather than cling to it as tragedy. To mourn is human, but to release with acceptance is to participate in the natural flow of the psyche. Through this release, both the living and the departed find psychological healing. And in those moments of observation, the soul realizes something profound, that love is not an emotion, but an archetypal force. I saw love as the most powerful energy in the collective unconscious, stronger than fear, stronger than death. It is through love that the soul recognizes the self. It sees that every act of genuine relating, every confrontation with shadow, every moment of authentic being was not wasted. They form the bridge that leads to psychological wholeness. This is the awakening that transforms the fear of death into acceptance of transformation. I describe the passage after death as a moment of confrontation with the unconscious, not by force but by psychological necessity. The soul doesn't face an external judge, it faces its own shadow. In that instant, everything repressed becomes visible, not as punishment, but as integration. The life review isn't about guilt, it's about making the unconscious conscious. The soul experiences every projection it placed on others, every mask it wore, every authentic moment, every betrayal of the self comes back, reflected through the psychic mirror of relationship. I learned that the soul experiences the entire story of its life, not through memory, but through archetypal imagery. It sees where it acted from shadow and where it reflected the self. The pain of realization is not inflicted from outside. It emerges from within, from the psyche recognizing its own fragmentation. The soul finally understands that heaven and hell are not external places but psychological states. For some, this recognition brings integration so profound that they merge instantly with the self. For others, the weight of unexamined shadow creates what I call the dark night of the soul, psychological states they must process before finding peace. I often explained that these dark states are self-created, formed formed by repression, projection, and identification with persona. The soul must dissolve them through radical self-honesty, not confession to others, but acknowledgement of the totality of one's being. I learned that no psyche is ever condemned permanently. Evolution is the fundamental law of consciousness. The self, I discovered, is infinitely compassionate, and even the most fragmented soul is capable of wholeness because the archetype of totality exists within every human being. The psyche, I realized, is a self-regulating system, and death is not the end of development, it is transition to another mode of existence. I also understood that the soul's journey doesn't end after the life review. Once it integrates its shadow, it is drawn toward levels of the collective unconscious corresponding to its degree of individuation. Some call it heaven. I called it the objective psyche, composed of layers or archetypal realms. Each realm represents a frequency of consciousness, from personal complexes to universal archetypes to the self itself. Souls of similar integration naturally gravitate together. The individuated find themselves among beings of light, manifestations of the self, while those who lived in unconsciousness are drawn to darker regions of the psyche until they achieve awareness. But even there, I learned, archetypal helpers work to guide them toward consciousness. No soul exists in isolation. I witnessed one of the most beautiful psychological truths, the presence of the self in every layer of the unconscious. The self is the organizing principle of the entire psyche, the God image that guides all consciousness toward wholeness. Even in the deepest shadow, there is always a spark of the self showing the way home. And when a soul finally turns toward that light, no matter how lost in neurosis or fragmentation, it is received immediately into integration. There is no eternal punishment, only psychological process, no abandonment, only temporary unconsciousness. The purpose of existence, I came to see, is individuation, becoming who you truly are by integrating all aspects of the psyche. When the soul understands this, death loses its terror. It becomes an awakening into reality itself. I understood that as the soul continues beyond the personal psyche, it enters what I called the archetypal realm, where thought becomes reality and symbols hold absolute power. Here, what the soul believes manifests immediately. If one expects judgment, it may encounter the archetype of the judge until it learns that the self accepts all. If it expects union, it may experience what mystics call divine marriage, the union of conscious and unconscious. This is why I insisted that our psychological work matters profoundly, not because it pleases some external deity, but because it shapes the reality we awaken into after death. I often said that the psyche is the only reality we ever know, and this law continues beyond the grave. Every symbol we integrate, every complex we resolve, every piece of shadow we acknowledge constructs the conditions of our existence in the archetypal realm. The soul becomes the creator of its own psychological reality. Those who cultivated consciousness and self-awareness encounter luminous archetypal figures. Those who lived in denial or projection may encounter terrifying shadow manifestations until they remember to seek the self within. This teaching was not meant to frighten, but to empower. I want humanity to understand that wholeness is not earn externally, it is achieve internally. I believe that each soul carries the imprint of the self, and that through psychological work we restore awareness of that divine center. When the soul accepts this truth, it moves toward what I called the pleroma, the realm of fullness where all opposites are united and the self reigns supreme. There, the soul reviews not only the life it just left, but also the archetypal patterns connecting all its experiences. I learned that this is where the soul recognizes synchronicities, sees relationships as expressions of the collective unconscious, and understands that nothing is random. Every meeting, every loss, every dream was a step in the individuation process. I emphasized that Christ is the perfect symbol of the self, the archetype of wholeness incarnated in human form. I described Christ not as a distant religious figure, but as the psychological model, of what integration means, the union of divine and human, conscious and unconscious. In my near-death experience, I saw that when the soul encounters the self, it sees the reflection of its own totality. Some weep with recognition, others tremble with awe, but all experience love so complete that it heals every split in the psyche. This encounter, I believe, is the destiny of every being, no matter how far into unconsciousness it has wandered. The moment the soul surrenders to the self, it is embraced by that archetypal wholeness and filled with peace that transcends all understanding. I learned, however, that not all souls accept this immediately. Some cling to ego identification, to guilt, to defensive structures. They turn away from the self, not realizing it is their own center calling them home. For these souls, archetypal guides, often appearing as deceased loved ones or wise figures, remain present, offering truth, providing compassion until readiness emerges. I discovered that the thoughts of the living can reach these souls like psychological energy, reminding them of the self's existence. That is why I urged people to hold departed souls in consciousness with love, because psychic connection transcends dimensions. The soul that feels such connection begins to individuate, drawn by the remembrance of wholeness. I taught that as the soul ascends into deeper layers of the collective unconscious, it moves from fragmentation to integration, from neurosis to wholeness. Each level reveals greater understanding of archetypal law. I learned that linear time dissolves into what I called synchronicity, a meaningful arrangement of psychic and physical events. The soul communicates not through language, but through symbols instantly understood by others in that same state of consciousness. Here, learning continues. Souls study the archetypes, the dynamics of transformation, the nature of the self. They help those still on earth through dreams and intuitions, often becoming the unconscious voices that guide our psychological development. I came to understand that these connections between the living and the departed are manifestations of the collective unconscious. They are proof that death cannot sever psychic connection, only transform it. I also revealed that some souls, after integration and reflection, choose to return to physical existence. Reincarnation, for me, not religious doctrine, but psychological hypothesis. The soul returns not to suffer again, but to continue individuation in a new context, to work through complexes left unresolved, and to achieve greater wholeness. Each life, I believe, is an opportunity for consciousness development. Every relationship, challenge, and crisis is an expression of the psyche seeking balance. And just as psychological work requires repeated effort, the soul may incarnate multiple times until it truly achieves the goal of individuation. That is the purpose of existence, not eternal rest, but eternal growth toward the self. No one should fear this journey. When the soul encounters the self, there is only recognition, not of judgment, but of homecoming. Wholeness, I learned, is not a place one reaches, but a state one realizes was always present. Those who lived with self-awareness, shadow work, and authenticity already carry the self within them. The transition after death simply reveals what was always there beneath the ego. Those who ignored the unconscious could awaken in a state of confusion until they remember their true nature. The mercy of the self, however, is absolute. There is no permanently lost soul, only one that has temporarily forgotten its center. This truth changes everything about how we live. It means that every act of consciousness today creates the reality of tomorrow. Every shadow confronted shapes not only this life, but the next. My message is not about death. It is about individuation, about awakening to the self that exists within every human being. When you understand this, fear transforms into acceptance. You begin to live authentically, knowing that every moment is an opportunity for psychological growth and that the soul's journey is infinite. So if these words awaken something inside you, stay with my message until the end, because the final revelation will show how I connected this journey of the soul directly to the self, the eternal center guiding every being toward wholeness. The self is not merely a psychological concept, but a living reality, the God image manifested within the human psyche. I described it as the totality of consciousness, the union of all opposites, the center that guides individuation. In my near-death experience, I saw the self as pure light, not external, but radiating from within every soul. When the psyche surrenders completely to that inner light, it experiences what I can only call psychological rebirth. The pain of ego identification fades. The fear of annihilation transforms into recognition. The soul realizes that nothing truly dies, that consciousness continues evolving through infinite transformations. I learned that in this moment, the soul is freed from persona. It no longer clings to social masks, achievements, or failures, but rests in the truth that only the self is real. From this awareness, the soul begins to participate consciously in the collective unconscious. Many souls, I discovered, choose to guide the living through archetypal influence, becoming helpful presences in dreams and creative inspiration. Others continue individuating in the archetypal realm, but all are united by one psychological law: to grow toward wholeness by integrating all aspects of being. For me, this was the highest destiny of every soul, to remember the self and to embody it completely. I urged every person to live each day as though death were imminent, not to fear it, but to live with such psychological honesty that the moment of departure becomes one of integration, not fragmentation. Wholeness must be achieved here and now, not postponed to an afterlife. The psyche you build in life is the reality you inhabit in death. Now, that is the secret hidden in all my work, that the inner world determines the outer, that the unconscious made conscious transforms everything. The symbols you integrate, the shadows you accept, the consciousness you cultivate, these are the foundations of immortality. When the body is gone, these are what remain. So live as one already whole, because you are. And if you've come this far in this reflection, let this moment remind you that you are not separate from the self. You are not an ego with a soul. You are a manifestation of the collective unconscious expressing itself through individual form. Let that truth free you from ego identification. Live with authenticity, integrate your shadow often, and let your consciousness reflect the self within you. Because when your time comes, you won't be facing an ending. You'll be stepping into the wholeness you always were. Remember, as I said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Build your wholeness with consciousness, and you will never fear death again.